Greetings, fellow Watford fans, and again, Happy New Year to you. This is the Orns 10-minute plus take on Newcastle United 1, Watford 1 in the Premier League. A massive point for Watford it was today, as the Orns, who were literally 5 minutes or so away from defeat, grabbed a valuable point in their fight against the drop with a goal from João Pedro. In the 88th minute, cross from Kiko Femenia that met the head of João Pedro, his second Premier League goal of the season for the Orns, giving them a share of the spoils today at St James's Park. Watford, for most of this game, were on the back foot, especially in the first half, rather, as Newcastle sent in ball after ball, cross after cross, set piece after set piece. And the woodwork denied them on a couple of occasions, at least one in that first half, where Joe Linton managed to hit the crossbar and it hit the other side, the wrong side of the Watford goal. Thank goodness for that for Watford, who were second best in the first half. A series of counter-attacking endeavors that did not really pay off for Watford and left them looking bereft of ideas in the forward line. But João Pedro, that man João Pedro, was the only one that seemed to have a spark of life of him in that first half, as he made some promising runs forward, particularly in the last 15 minutes of the first half. But generally speaking, the first half was all Newcastle, and the Watford defense held up under stern pressure, defending well. The three new signings, Kayembe, Samir, and Kamara, all doing very well. In fact, Kamara, I think, was the jewel of the crown of all three, with some superb defending and some confident movement forward. His attitude on and off the ball are absolutely wonderful. It's just a really good thing to see somebody brand new in this team that wants to go and take the ball by the scruff of it and just keep going forward. I really like the composure of Kamara. He was very good indeed today in his very first Watford game, his very first game, as far as I know, in English football. He did a superb job. I think he and João Pedro should probably share the man of the match spoils today, but all three new signings could probably get man of the match. Samir was very steady in his central defensive pairing, and also Kayembe in midfield was good too. I thought that he brought some life and some movement and some ideas as well. So the three new signings absolutely paid off. The Watford board has done a very good job here getting these three players in just a few days, about a week or so before this massive game, and they've all risen to the occasion quite splendidly. So kudos to the board today, Gino and Scott, and the board at large for doing the job and doing it well here with these three new signings. It remains to be seen, by the way, if Watford will get any more signings in. But these three signings have shown you that they have put stature back in this Watford defense. They've given the team some stature. They've given them solidity, at least off the back of this game. All three signings, the SKK group, as I call them, Samir, Kayembe, and Kamara, have done a really good job. And hats off to all three of them and to João Pedro for his goal in the 88th minute. But it was Newcastle again in the first half who enjoyed much of the possession and controlled the game for much of that first half. And the one problem for Watford in the first half was they kept losing the ball in midfield. They lost the second ball in midfield. And when you are devising a counter-attack strategy for the bulk of your game, you've got to have some idea of the risk of what will happen if you lose that second ball in midfield. And they did it time and time again, gave away a lot of lazy set pieces in their first half. But the second half was a whole lot better. The Watford defense continued to grow on, but there was one massive mistake made. Massive mistake. I think it was the 51st minute or so, whenever it was. Massive mistake made by Jeremy Ngaki, who prior to that had an excellent game, bottling up Alain Saint-Maximin, but did not get rid of that ball when he should have. Jeremy Ngaki had dawdled on the ball too long, and in the Premier League, you cannot dawdle on the ball. This is not the championship, of course, where you have a little bit more time, a lot more time to play the ball and do whatever you want to do with it. In the Premier League, it's just 5 seconds on the ball, if that. If that, you probably don't even have 5 seconds because there is always going to be an opposition player sniffing around. And Jeremy Ngakia next time will learn, and I'm sure he has already learned, that what you do in that situation with the ball is kick it out, kick it into touch, and have a new possession. Newcastle get the throw in and you reset your defense. That is the lesson that Ngakia will learn, and all of Watford players will learn that lesson once again. We've seen it a number of times over the last few weeks with with the failure to clear balls into touch that helped, and they ended up hurting Watford. We've seen that with Kuchka. We've seen that with a number of others who, instead of clearing out the ball, just dawdled on it, tried to get cute. You cannot get cute in the Premier League. And again, Jeremy Ngaki, who had a very good game otherwise, will learn that lesson now. And it led to, of course, Saint Maximas robbing the ball from him, really taking the ball from him, coming inside, cutting inside past three defenders, and just unleashing a crackerjack shot past Ben Foster, who had no chance in the Watford goal of stopping it. It was a really good strike from St. Maximin, but that's what you've come to expect from one of the most live wire players in the Premier League. By the way, Ben Foster had a good game today. It's not that he had to do an awful lot, but his steadiness in the goal was what Watford had missed from their goalkeeping, of course, Daniel Bachmann, coming back into the bench where he really belongs, quite frankly, for all the things that I have said about Ben Foster and other Watford fans have said about Ben Foster this season. Ben Foster still cuts a more confident figure, a more authoritative figure, a more demanding figure in that goal. And he has made it clear today that that number one position is his, barring any future injuries. And Ben Foster did well to come back earlier than expected. He was probably expected to be back another couple of weeks from now. And for him to come back in the Watford side as the starting number one between the sticks is a very good thing for Watford. It brings them a bit more calm, despite the fact that, again, he has not been at his best, Ben Foster, this season, but certainly an improvement over Daniel Bachmann, if I may say so. Watford improved defensively overall. I think you've got to look at the fact that the defense today was calm, composed, otherwise methodical. The fundamentals returned to the defending. The good team defense was there. And again, it's down to these three new signings, I think, who put a bit more grounding, composure, and calm into the whole back line. You could see they played with a bit more freedom, a little less fear. They weren't tentative. They were not at sixes and sevens. I think the way that the defense was organized today by Claudio Ranieri, I thought was good. I do like the experience of the defenders. Like Cathcart came in, was very steady today. Samir, very steady today. Really like his debut. And also Kayembe in midfield, holding mid, or I think he was pretty much holding midfield. I thought he did a good job today. Again, as I say, these three signings, of course, with Kamara as well. Kamara, the best of the three, just composed themselves awfully well in a game like this, under a big pressure spotlight game like this. For all three of those players to do what they did, I thought was outstanding. Outstanding composure from all three in a massive game like this, where in a game like this, if we had the regular people that we'd probably have a good few more mistakes in us. But look, the fact of the matter is, you play with who you have, and Ngaki should start next week for me, despite the mistake. I think Ngaki had a very good game otherwise, and you don't want to dent a young player's confidence by putting him back on the bench after having the one mistake. I think you've got to inspire confidence in your players, and Ranieri, I think, has to play Ngaki next week. Whenever it is Watford play, whether it's Tuesday or whether it is Friday in these next two big games, likely going to be Friday because Norwich City is probably up next. Burnley have had their game postponed already against Leicester, so I expect it's probably going to be much the same on Tuesday night. Watford scheduled to visit Burnley, who do not have really not only enough players, but also have, I think, a COVID situation or two there. And you should expect that the game on Tuesday will be postponed. It's very likely to be, and it would be the second time, by the way, that the Burnley Watford fixture would have been postponed. It was supposed to have been played in December, and now it looks like the prospect of it being played on Tuesday is very small indeed at the minute, but you never know. We'll wait and see on that. But as for today's performance, Watford much better in the second half. You looked at them and they looked pretty good, especially after the mistake by Ngake led to the goal from St. Maximin. And Watford just kept coming forward. They never gave up on their goal, on the goal and the ambition of scoring it. They never gave up on their game plan. They kept executing it, and they never gave up on each other. They kept willing it. Watford did all these things, and in the 88th minute, their reward had been paid off, and it was cashed in. Great cross down the right side from Kiko Femeni. In fact, a very similar cross to the cross. If you cast your minds back to, I think it was September of 2021, when he crossed on ball from the very same right side and almost the same area, against Norwich City at Carrow Road. Ball came in. It met I think it met the head of Emmanuel Dennis on that day as he scored against Norwich. Same exact thing happened today as he crossed the ball in mid the head of João Pedro. João Pedro, a really good composed leap and finish of the bullet header into the back of the net, as that gave Watford a share of the points in the dying minutes of the game. And for a change, the late goals being scored by Watford. Newcastle, by the way, had a torrid record. They had a torrid bad record of conceding 10 goals in the final 15 minutes of matches in the Premier League this season. Make that 11, as they've conceded another late goal to give Watford a big lifeline as they continue to stay out of the relegation zone. The Watford now on 14 points, a point clear of Norwich, who won today. A big win for them against Everton. That was a massive win for Norwich. But for Watford, a point away from home is massive. I would have loved to have three. I think all of us as Watford fans would love to have had 3 points today. That did not happen, but we did get one, and one is better than none. And in this league, you have to pick up the points where you can get them and keep moving forward. In this game, Watford will improve, and I think they'll improve in the next game they play, whomever they play it against, because again, the defensive fundamentals are there for this club. It's just a matter, once again, of cleaning up the defensive mistakes. And also, when you're in front of goal, finishing better. A good opportunity for Josh King went awry when he had a heavy second touch on the ball that took the ball straight really to Martin Dubravka in the Newcastle goal. And then the miss of the day, obviously, was the one from Musa Sissoko, who, for the first time in a Watford shirt, did not have all of his usual zest and verve. But again, I think Sissoko is entitled to one off day. He's been splendid in the time he's been here at Watford, but he made a splendid miss indeed in the second half of the game, around the 61st or second minute, when he really should have made it 1-1 beforehand. And it was a glaring miss, and it looked as if that would be the thing that cost Watford. But Watford kept going and kept believing. And as a result of all of that hard work and endeavor that they did in that second half, where they were very good, they got their goal and their just desserts, and they got a 1-1 draw out of St. James's Park. You knew that Newcastle were going to sit back and try to sit on a 1-0, which I think is a dangerous thing to do in the Premier League. Even when you're at home, to sit on a 1-0 lead is not required. Even if you're in a relegation scrap, you can't afford to do that. Newcastle got hurt and they got punished. They did not clear their lines. The cross came in, and there it was between the defenders, João Pedro heading in. And again, this is after sustained Watford pressure. When you defend deep, you invite on your opposition like Newcastle did, and they got hurt, and it's cost them. And for Watford, thankfully, a priceless point there late in the game. As I said, now 11 goals in the final 15 minutes of Premier League games this season for Newcastle conceded. That is the big thing for Newcastle at the minute. But for Watford FC, our big thing is the failure to keep a clean sheet. Had we done that today, we'd have all 3 points. But maybe the game would have been indifferent. Maybe the game would not have ended the way it did. It may not have ended at 1-0. It may have ended at 0-0 for all I know. But we'll never know now. What we are knowing here as Watford fans all is that it was a 1-1 draw. And Watford now are still the only team in any of the 4 English divisions in football to yet to have had a clean sheet. I may repeat that. Watford are the only team in all top 4 English divisions yet to have had a clean sheet. That has to be rectified. And you have to think that that is going to end sooner or later. Watford will join the ranks of everyone else, the other 90 or 91 clubs in the top 4 English divisions, to have actually had a clean sheet. I think it can happen here in the next game. Certainly if it's against Norwich, I think there's a good chance they can get that also in the game against Burnley, if that gets played at this moment. That remains to be seen. Watford still, though, do have 2 games in hand over some of the other teams around them. So that is good news, but you can't rely on games in hand. You've got to rely on wins in hand, and you've got to win the games that you play. Okay, they didn't manage to do that today, but the most important thing is, having failed to win the game, you don't want to go and lose the game. And Watford's resiliency came through, and this will be a massive boost to this Watford side. Obviously, the three new signings were a massive boost to the side, and the temperament of their goalkeeper, Ben Foster, was a massive boost. A veteran presence who has command of the game, command of the goalkeeping space. He did well today. He didn't have a lot to do, as I said. He did well today. And the performance today was a better performance. It wasn't an excellent performance, it was a better performance. And it was building on what happened against Tottenham, despite the late goal there. Watford built on the performance. They kept a clean sheet for the first half, and then, of course, they made the mistake as they did. But then the rest of the way, Watford's defensive composure was good. Still more to improve on, still more to clean up the defensive mistakes. And the finishing, finishing's got to be better. If you want to stay in this league, you have to start finishing these chances off because, of course, you only get two or three of them, one or two of them in an away game. Watford's next game hopefully will be against Burnley away from home. But if it's not, what Watford must focus on as well as cleaning up those defensive mistakes, individual defensive mistakes, is the finishing. The finishing has got to go better than it has today, because if Musa Sissoko finishes that against his former club today, we could be talking about 3 points. And Watford will need to have finishers. Josh King did good running today, but did not get a lot of involvement in the goal, rather in the game at large. Largely invisible, as was Emmanuel Dennis, who really, I think, for the first time this season, very ineffective indeed. João Pedro, sublimely effective, liked his running, liked his commitment, had his head up, positive, fearless, and he really did want that goal. He just went up for that goal and went up for that ball, powered it in. And my goodness me, that will definitely go a long way toward lifting the spirits of not only the fans around the place, but also these players who have worked and worked and worked and worked. And I'm sure the board will be pleased with what happened today. Again, I have been critical of the board of late because, again, their big mistake this season was not investing in defense in the first place, as they should have in the summer. At least put some defenders in for us. I know that there's not a lot of money to spend, but my goodness gracious me, coming into the Premier League, it's a completely different defensive animal. You have to start stocking up in defense. Well, they've listened to us here. Obviously, they've heard from lots of us as Watford fans, and I'm so thankful to Gino and to Scott for doing what they've done here with these three signings, bringing them in. These are exactly the players that you need in this team, like in this fight to stay in the Premier League. You need players who are calm, steady, composed, intelligent, make the right kinds of decisions, and aren't afraid to go forward and just restore the fundamentals back into the defensive team making and team units, and team ability. The defensive ability of this team absolutely was on display today, where I think they looked composed. They looked like they knew what their roles were, and they all were aggressively defending these balls coming in from the set pieces. I think Watford, if they can do something better also, is to limit the set pieces. A lot of rash tackles and a lot of Newcastle set pieces, especially in that first half, which I think Watford could have cut down on, and I think were quite needless. But the fact of the matter is, Watford come out the game today with a point, a valuable point that's going to add to the tally. They have 14 points now. What do they need? Roughly, I think, to keep them in, they're probably going to need 37 points to keep them up. So totally, if they get to the 37-point mark, I mean. So at the moment, they've got 14. They need about 23 more points, I think, 23, 24 more points to keep them in the Premier League, because you can see there is not going to be too much of a winning factor going on for the bottom four teams in these next couple of months, unless Watford start to pull away with some performances where they win. And again, the next two games are massive must wins if the Burnley game goes forward, of course, and certainly next Friday at the Vic against Norwich. Friday night under the lights, Friday night football. That is what we probably will be getting next at the Vic between Watford and Norwich. Interestingly enough, both the games against Newcastle this season are the only two games that Watford have played in the Premier League this season to end in draws. So both draws for Watford against the same team, and both the same score, 1-1. And both of the games saw Newcastle score first and Watford come back late, relatively late on in both games to get a share of the points to score their goals. So that is an interesting trivia note. Once again, the final score from St James's Park was Newcastle 1, Watford 1. And that has been your Orns 10-minute plus take. I'm Omar Moore.